So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, back again for another battle replay. And today, we're on the arena. After a short break after the last battle, which I'm sure if you've already seen the battle that we beheld previously, the siege battle on Helm's Deep, you'll know where my mind space was at the end of that one. But hopefully after a little break, and hopefully with a certain guarantee of quality, because this map was sent to me by Eclipse 2500, or this battle I should say, and the map technically speaking, because it is a tweaked version of the arena. Hopefully we will see something with a little bit more of a guarantee of quality on it. But yes, the arena, there's been a few tweaks to it since the last time we've seen it. Mainly these large terrain features, these large mesas that sort of dot the map, have been made taller, so they provide more cover, and also you can no longer walk over some of them in the way that you could before. So it gives sort of some more closed areas of the map which can be used for certain tactics, I suppose, which I think is good. I think, you know, that being able to walk over those rocks previously didn't really add anything to either side. It was something you could do, but it wasn't really recommended for either side to try and do, to be honest with you, because the pathfinding was a little bit weird, so I can understand why that has been changed. But yes, we have, I believe it's good versus evil. It looks kind of promising. I mean, looking at it from this side of the map where I was, there's Dorwinion and there's Numenor, who technically count as both, obviously, and then you've got Umbar, and I think there's Harad. I've seen Mumakil, so it's looking promising from that perspective to be lore friendly. We shall see. I might be wrong about that. There might be other factions, but hopefully not. Balagai footmen on the front line for Eclipse. He's playing as one of two Umbar armies today, I believe. I think there was another Umbar army down the other side. At least it was the same colour in the 4v4 thing. So Balagai footmen, obviously, you know, as far as Umbar goes, generally speaking, they're going to be spending more money on their infantry, but the Balagai footmen are a way that they can save a little bit of money and have a decent amount of holding power on the front line, but they don't really offer a lot of damage, of course. Alcarondas Legion, very good unit of line infantry. One of the best units of line infantry for me, just because whilst there are line infantry units that can outclass them, as far as their cost goes, I think they're very reasonably priced for what they offer. You can also bring a pretty hefty number of them before you're subject to the increased costs of the red limit on the lobby screen. So definitely a good unit to bring, definitely a good unit to have at your disposal as Umbar. More Balagai footmen. He's gone for some Balakith Axe Guard without the armour upgrade, which actually the Balakith units, as I've said before, they don't really have the best armour values if you don't upgrade the armour, so it is worth just bearing that in mind as you bring them. I mean, especially with the Axe Guard, because of course they don't have the luxury of a shield. But still, they actually have decent melee defense for a heavy axeman. It's still not the best, obviously, but it's decent for what they are, which can sort of slightly make up for that. Balagai pikemen, just to offer obviously that phalanx on the front line. Some Corsair infantry, which will offer you a few volleys of sort of lower end archers, or archer volleys. And then, obviously, sort of makeshift light infantry units as well, to go along with your heavier units. More Balakith Axe Guard, again, without the armour upgrade. He's gone for some knights, which again, on a field battle such as this, you're definitely going to want, I think. You know, Warlords of Umbar, obviously Lance Knights as well, really, really devastating charge. More Balagai Pikes, another line of Alcarondas Legion in behind with some Balagai Archers at the back. There's some Naru Naru Sentinels over on that side as well for a really heavy archer unit. And finally, some Harbingers of Castamere as well, which is where the general is at. So he can use his knights a little bit more freely and a little bit more aggressively without needing to worry about losing his general. And his general will be marching with the main army as part of the heavy swordsman unit. Then we have Starling, who's playing as Harad. Harad, obviously, not exactly the quality powerhouse that Umbar is, but they do have a lot of AP at their disposal. They're very at home when it comes to being aggressive and on the front foot. We shall see if that's what they do this time, though. In a 4v4, it can often depend on what your allies do as to what will be viable for you. Haradrim archers, they're just going to be here to sort of take some pot shots, sort of engage the enemy archers, but they're not going to be winning the battle for Harad, most certainly. Southron pikemen and Muhard berserkers, so a lot of AP here, albeit, you know, delivered in different ways and at different rates. But an interesting front line to be sure. Some Southron warband either side of it as well, so some AP spears. To be honest with you, the shields aren't the best on them, but it's better than having nothing at all. Some Haradrim spearmen over here too. Trollman of Harad, Haradrim spearmen at the back, an interesting formation he's got going on here. More Trollman, some champions of Nafarat over here. Obviously a really, really powerful bodyguard unit because of the AP. I also saw something else, did I? Nope, that's pretty much it. There might be stuff hidden in the trees as well that we just can't see. Indeed, I think there was just then, but no matter, we'll see it as the battle carries on, I'm sure. Another Harad army, actually, by FFA Muffins. He's got some Muhard Beastmasters and some Mumakil at the back, so some good manoeuvrable, ranged cavalry units, technically, albeit the Mumakil are kind of their own entity in that regard. We shall see if the Mumakil can be used to good effect here. Kind of a difficult unit to use at the best of times, really. We shall see, though. Haradrim Spearmen and Southron Pikemen on the front line. Some more Haradrim Spearmen hidden in amongst the champions of Nathrat, which is where the general's at, which is why they're not hidden in the trees. And there he is. And the rest of the army hidden back here. Serpent Guard are in there. Demons of the Desert are in there. Very nice unit, obviously Trollmen. So yeah, a lot of the units hidden in these trees. And then finally, the second Umbar unit. So 2 Umbar, 2 Harad, with the Umbar units out wide with the quality. We shall see what Harad do in the middle. Belagar archers for Inarius, obviously really good in the skirmish fight. It's really awkward to try and skirmish with Umbar, to be honest with you, over a longer period of time, just because very rarely are you going to get what you want out of that fight. Even if you end up maybe coming off slightly the better for it, you won't. You've invested a lot of money just to do that. Umbar then will be able to use their quality infantry to try and engage you. So Umbar can be very sort of, to play the long game against Umbar, it can be quite difficult. There are factions that can do it, obviously, but it's awkward at the best of times. A Dunaim Shield Guard, obviously higher tier spears to help hold the line. Naruna Iron Sentinels are a really strong unit of pikes, shielded pikes as well. They're really the one unit of pikes in the game, I would say, that you don't really want to be using archer ammunition on, just because their armour is so thick. They have those shields, unless you can shoot them in the back, possibly, but I mean, if Umbar are playing correctly, they're not going to allow archers into their back lines to shoot at their phalanx. Alcarondas Legion, again, in numbers, just in behind their heavy Black Numenorian units. Of course, their Blackguards. Some fencers hiding out over here as well. Interesting that we can see the other Umbar hidden units, but not the Haradrim ones. Harbingers of Castamere. Some Corsair crossbows, another unit of Warlords, more Blackguards, and I believe we do indeed have the Alcarondas Faithful as well. So Umbar, they have access to really high tier cavalry, but they can't bring them in great numbers. But Inarius has gone for a very elite army here. He's gone for a lot of more high cost units like the Adunaim units, Narinaru, Alcarondas, and then his high tier cavalry. So he doesn't have a lot of numbers here, which may be a problem. He is facing off against Tundra's Fox playing as Dol Amroth, albeit Dol Amroth have deployed a little bit further back, making use of this slight choke point that he can take advantage of. He's got some Dorwinion swordsmen covering for the Athalond Halberdiers, who should be really good as long as they aren't engaged by the Narinaru Sentinels. That AP will be really useful against stuff like the Alcarondas Legion. We've got some Belfalas Marines, so the Javelins as well. As far as Javelins go, the Blackguards are going to be able to do more damage with their volleys, but the Belfalas Marines have got much more ammunition. I mentioned in the last battle, aside from the rant, that I wasn't really the biggest fan of the Belfalas Marines or the Pelagia Marines. They occupy a kind of in-between space between cheap Javelins, who are really easy to get cost efficiency with, and the expensive Javelins, who are going to do the real damage. They're kind of in between that. They can still be very useful as long as you get them into a place where they can fire consistently, but on a field battle, that can be a little bit more tricky. Haven Guard, obviously really strong unit of infantry. Dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan, they're going to be really useful for buffing the morale. That's actually where Imbrahil is as well, interestingly enough, not in the Haven Guard. He's instead in the slightly weaker of the two units. Civilians are over here just to pad out their numbers a bit. Black Swan Renegades, so just the one unit of Black Swan Renegades, I believe. No, 2 units of Black Swan Renegades, so yeah. AP, he's gone for them instead of the Parathil champions on this occasion. Against Umbar, is that worthwhile? Probably. I mean, they do lack the fear, but fear is not really going to take hold against Umbar anyway, to be honest with you. So yeah, you're probably better off against using the Mace Man. More Dorwinion swordsman, he's gone for a very scattered approach here. He's got some Haven Knights at the back, obviously really powerful melee cavalry. From a cavalry perspective, Dol Amroth should have the beating of Umbar, even with the quality that Umbar have brought, to be honest with you, because Tundra's Fox has done much the same, only in greater numbers. He has gone for some Parathil Riders as well, so he's got some ranged cavalry. Get to see the Arathirim, which are one of the best looking units in the game, to my mind, but I'll never quite forgive them for how they constantly let me down when they were a lower manpower unit. They only had 22 men in the unit before they were buffed to having just being normal knights, effectively. We shall see. And also some Parathil Horse Guard, which are effectively the regular Dol Amroth melee cavalry. You don't see them all that often, to be honest with you, even though I think they're a good unit. Mainly because still, in spite of the devs' best efforts, really expensive heavy cavalry is still king. If you have a choice of what to bring, you should always bring your elite units of cavalry, to be honest with you. Basic cavalry is okay, but generally speaking, you're going to want to splurge that little bit extra. I was wrong, it's not Law Friend. There's always one, isn't there? There's always one player who sees the theme that's developing in the battle and goes, no, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to ruin the theme. Regardless, we have Finrod, who's playing as Rhun. who have seen the light, I guess, and they're going to be, there's some very mercenary riders sticking out of the trees, and the rest of his army is going to be hidden in and amongst the trees, but, well, actually we can see some of them sticking out over here, but I imagine it's going to be fairly simple. Like Rhun, they do have a decently sized roster, but for the most part, they're going to have a good core of Loke units, which obviously with the Gamprim over here, that's not too surprising. He's also gone for the Dragon Knights, which are obviously a very good unit of Lance Knights because of how tanky they are. Only really the Knights of Numenor can outperform them in those terms. And I'd imagine there's probably some Flag Rim back there as well. Even if he is directly opposite Harad, the Flag Rim is still useful to have around in case he has to face Umbar as well. Sin of the Dark Cloud, he has returned to playing as Numenor after his excursions as Dorwinion. And obviously I think Numenor are the superior of the two factions, certainly. Numenorian Shield Guard on the front line again. AP Spear is not going to be the most useful against Harad, but overall quality, they're not really going to have too many issues dealing with most of the Haradrim. The main problem is going to be Harad's plentiful AP sources and their high tier units like their Trollmen, going to be very important against Numenor, especially when you consider Numenorian cohort who will butcher their way through Haradrim and Southron units with relative ease. Seafarers of Nindamos back here as well, nice javelin support. Javelin's an area where Harad should be able to sort of maintain a bit of an advantage over Numenor, to be honest, but I will say that I think Starling didn't bring all that many, or if he did, they were hidden in the trees. Pharazim Swordmasters, again, there's really no heavy swordsmen in the game at this point that can match the Pharazim Swordmasters with that third hit point they were given. Numenorian Steel Bows, Royal Legion of Armenelos, and some Pharazim Nobles to offer some mobility and some protection against enemy cavalry. And then finally, Engsvitz playing as Dorwinion. So yeah, it really was just Finrod who was breaking the theme. And yeah, Dorwinion, they kind of have one way that they can approach things. Against Umbar, it's kind of a tricky matchup for them, to be honest with you, because they have the ability to hold Umbar for a decent amount of time, but doing damage to Umbar's elites is going to be a different matter entirely. They're going to have to rely on their Morroquendi to do that. Elvelyn Vinegard to help hold down the front line. To be fair, Dorwinion are one of those factions which can skirmish with Umbar and be comfortable still. It's not really a battle where either side is going to gain a significant advantage regardless of who wins. But the Elvelyn marksmen should be able to outperform a lot of those Umbar archers that are across the way. Elvelyn infantry, Morroquendi pikes. I mean, the Morroquendi pikes will be able to outperform the Belagai ones at the very least. Some Vinegard holding down the two flanks. And he's also got some Nandor Glade Riders and some Morroquendi Glade Lords. The Glade Lords actually should, in melee, in theory, be better than the Warlords, I think. But again, it all depends on what kind of engagements these armies take. Without further ado, let's begin. And I do think it will be over here where we start to see the first engagements, because Eclipse is closest to Engsvitz as Dorwinion, whereas over on the other side, Dol Amroth being a little bit further back, Harad also being a little bit further back behind those rock formations means I think it's going to be over here where we see the first engagements. So two Elvelyn marksmen. Corsair infantry doesn't really have the ammunition to be going toe-to-toe with the Elvelyn for an extended period of time, to my mind. Also, they are lacking their armour upgrade here, so they're going to be just that a little bit weaker. But the Corsair infantry, you never really expect them to dominate a skirmish fight, you just expect them to take a few pot shots, absorb a bit of damage, and then later on, Umbar go for that slow skirmish to start, and then as the battle wears on, that's when their quality infantry can really come into its own. As the Elvelyn marksmen prepare their volleys. I wonder what they're going to try shooting at here. I mean, they can shoot the Corsair infantry and some arrows may go long and fortunately connect with the Belagai pikes. That might be the best way to approach this, to be honest with you, because you can't just sit here and do nothing as Umbar continuously take pot shots at you, because the Corsair infantry can do this, and then of course Eclipse does have that secondary line of Belagai archers he can bring forward as well, so he's got plenty of arrows at his disposal. Which is not the worst idea in the world for Umbar in this situation, I don't think, because it's very unlikely that Dorwinion are going to be aggressive against Umbar, so you can sort of bring more archers than the average and be fairly confident that Dorwinion aren't going to roll forwards and take advantage of that. And I think that's definitely the case here. Of course, the flip side to this is Umbar, while they do have all these archers, these Elvelyn, well, they will take losses at the hands of these archers, of course. Their armour is such that Umbar aren't really going to get a ton of value off of all these arrows they're sending down range, and ultimately they're going to still be well out of range of the stuff that they would really want to be shooting, which is like the Morroquendi pikes. Variag mercenary riders and Parathor riders, so Rhun and Dol Amroth both with a good amount of horse archers here. Numenor coming, and Umbar moving away from the Dol Amroth position, which is not really surprising. Umbar aren't going to sort of attack into a choke point, the Dol Amroth have got well fortified with phalanx units, while Dol Amroth then go around with their cavalry and start claiming the more open sections of the map for the red team. So again, yeah, not terribly surprising that. Over here though, it is going to come down to who claims the advantage in the mounted game, I think. Dol Amroth have brought a lot of cavalry, Rhun have also got horse archers and knights at their disposal. It's a lot of investment, but also Harad and Umbar have also done the same. I would say they've got slightly less of a stake there, but still. It's not really the sort of battle they can afford to lose for nothing. Parathil Riders taking pot shots from the Mumakil. Decent armour on the Parathil Riders. That is one thing they definitely have in their favour as horse archers, but even so, like, it's horse archers really is a harassment tool. You don't really want them taking continuous fire, otherwise they're going to be in trouble. But horse archers of this quality could be really, really useful if they get them into a position to shoot at the Haradrim forces. Muffin's coming forward. This is actually exactly what Tundra's Fox wants, I think, because he can sort of fire directly into the... Actually, no, he's not going for them. I thought he's going for the Adunheim Shield Guard, which is not really the best target, to be honest. Heavily armoured, heavily shielded, not going to do a ton of damage. If I were him, though, I'd definitely be targeting the Muhad Beast Hunters. They have shields, but not the best ones, and they're not very well armoured at all. Not entirely sure what Muffins wants to accomplish by going forward in this fashion. I mean, the Mumakil are continuously pushing back against the Parathil Riders, continuously doing damage, which is nothing to be sniffed at, I suppose, but they need to be careful. They don't want to be drawn into the Numenor javelins or spears, nor do they want to go too close to all of this cavalry the Dol Amroth have at their disposal. They don't want to take a full-blooded charge from the Arathirim. Certainly that'll damage even Mumakil. Of course, actually continuing to fire. They actually still firing, which is surprising. Helvellyn marksmen pushing a little bit further forwards. I think they were maybe going to try and take pot shots at the pikemen, but they were pulled back a little bit further. And the Belagair archers are now also in range, so yeah, in terms of sheer volume, this is where Dorwinion's archers could start to struggle. And a little bit of confusion breaking out amongst their ranks as they reform themselves. Yeah, interesting situation for Dorwinion to be... Oh, actually, that was something I completely missed. Warlords of Umbar charging into the Helvellyn marksmen. Not the best charge, though. I mean, you'd expect utter devastation from a charge of cavalry into the marksmen, but of course immediately revealing themselves 2 units of Morroquendi Stalkers. Several of those warlords getting last samurai'd on the approach, and now they're getting shot in the back as well, where their shields aren't even coming into effect. Of course, the downside to this is now the horse archers have revealed themselves, which means they are easy prey. I'm actually very surprised none of them died to that. It is only Corsair infantry who have relatively low quality arrows, but the Morroquendi Stalkers, they're relatively lightly armoured. Damage is the name of the game for them, not survivability. So Engsvitz can count himself rather lucky there that none of those ended up dying. Helvellyn marksman continues to move forward. I don't really know what he hopes to accomplish here. I mean, maybe he's trying to bait the Warlords of Umbar back out so he can start shooting them once again. And it's, I mean, Eclipse is showing restraint, but I mean, at this point the Corsair infantry may very well be out of ammunition. Indeed, I do believe they have their scimitars. No, they don't. They have their bows drawn still, but I mean, they could close down in melee. And they do have that extra utility, up close and personal, and those Helvellyn marksmen are already depleted, so definitely back the Corsair infantry here. They outnumber them by just under 100, around 80. Alcarondas Legion moving forward as well. I mean, it's almost like Eclipse can't really make up his mind about what he genuinely wants to do here. Whether he wants to fully commit to a full-blooded assault, or back off just a little bit. In comes a charge. I mean, the Helvellyn Vanguard are sort of infantry units, but they are spears. They have that spear malice, but yeah, this isn't going to go very well for the Corsair infantry with all of these units around now, unless Umbar sends in reinforcements, which it looks like they could do. Victory seems certain for the Corsair infantry. That's surprising. Helvellyn marksmen are shaken. In come the Glade Lords. Don't know if they can get an amazing charge, but it might be enough to do some pretty substantial damage, but they will need to cycle back out of there, otherwise the Alcarondas Legion are going to do the damage. Meanwhile, over here, Haradrim Spearmen from Starling being sent over to offer a bit of support, but it's interesting, like, low tier spears like this are still going to take an enormous amount of damage from a unit of Lancers that have 20 charge, but they need to get out there, the Nandor Glade Riders, because they are very fragile, and they really don't want to be expending too much of their unit just going after something like the Haradrim Spearmen. But yeah, bisecting the unit there. In come the Warlords of Umbar, charging again, last samuraiing themselves into the Morroquendi Stalkers, but they do make it. Still with 23 of them alive, but with Morroquendi Glade Lords on hand as well, the Stalkers can defend themselves in melee well enough once that charge bonus wears off, so this is a bad situation for the Warlords at this point. They don't have the numbers, cavalry-wise, to deal with this. Especially not with the Pharazim Nobles on the way across also. Nandor Glade Riders. Yeah, those spears really didn't stand a chance, ever. Eclipse struggling a little bit here. He's sort of pushed forward some units, but they're getting picked off here. And the Warlords, yeah, they're broken. Biting off way more than they can chew there. And yeah, I think at this point Eclipse sees the dire nature of the situation. He needs to send forward more of his army. And so that is what he's doing. Harad coming over here to support with some cavalry, but it's only Serpent Guard. Like, against Pharazim Nobles, they'll struggle. There's a lot of Serpent Guard over here, though. FFA Muffin's coming across with his Mumakil as well, seeing that this is the epicenter of the battle at the moment. Everyone else sort of just staring at each other across no man's land. Eastron Horse Guard coming across from Rhun. Yeah, they're moving in, and they're going to be able to go at these Corsair Infantrymen if they so choose. They're going to get a charge off. A softer target, certainly, and Eclipse can't really afford to take too much more in the way of damage. I mean, certainly up close and personal, this is necessary for Dorwinion to have much of a chance in melee, because against the Alcarondas Legion, the Balakath Guard, supported by pikes, Dorwinion aren't going to enjoy that fight at all in melee. They can hold, but they can't really win. I mean, Nandor Glade Guard are all well and good, but they won't have the staying power. In come the Serpent Guard, charging into them as well. Very, very chaotic all of a sudden. Over here, yeah. So, I mean, Umbar are taking a lot of losses from cavalry and from archers, but again, they're going to need to. Otherwise, for Dorwinion, it's going to be a real issue for them. Muhad Beast Masters just in behind the Umbar front line, throwing their javelins. In come the Serpent Guard. I probably wouldn't recommend going in here, because there are pikes located here and there throughout this line, and now Numenor sending across their entire army, well, I say entire army, a very large proportion of their army, including some stragglers from Dorwinion that were defending the flanks now, moving across to try and wrap up the line. They're going to charge into this position over here. Muhad Beastmasters coming over to help shore up the Balagaya footmen and Corsair infantry. Again, I think that was the Warlords of Umbar that returned from routing, indeed it was, but once again they charged into a really, really horrendous situation, but I can see why they did it. They're just trying to delay. And now Inarius' Warlords are also coming in. You can see where the front line is, kind of. It's a bit of a jagged front line, but over here, Umbar's strength is really overrunning Dorwinion pretty quickly. Their infantry's going to need support. The Serpent Guard moving forwards, Inas Rim and Morroquendi Stalkers. There are the Glade Riders also, Keldon River Patrol. But yeah, this side of the line, I think Dorwinion are going to need to set up another section of their front line over here. In come the Mumakil, going after the Pharazim Nobles. Going in hard here, the Mumakil. Inas Rim trying to stop their progress, but their charge didn't really connect. And Harad also moving forward, so Starling has reacted to Sin moving in to support his ally in a big way. Still some Warlords from Eclipse over here, still fighting actually, but not for much longer surely. Lots of spears on hand. Harad moving forward with all their AP. How can Sin organise his lines to prevent this large-scale Southron assault? Ashari moving forward as well. Should be quite interesting, but yeah, I would say the blue team probably have the upper hand here, because I think Dorwinion, they're really struggling. Like, as much as Umbar took damage on the approach, Mumakil's starting to die off as well. But yeah, as much as they took damage on the approach, you can just see their superiority in melee. Also, I think the shape of the engagement wasn't ideal for Dorwinion. It was a little bit jagged. Umbar was able to take advantage of that, I feel. Numenor, while they have sent over some reinforcements, at this point Numenor have actually overextended themselves a little bit as well. Because now they've moved forward, and now Starling can potentially take advantage of some of the gaps that Numenor have left. With all of his Southrons. You can see there's some Numenorian cohort heading around the flank. They will be intercepted by Southron Warband, which won't be able to defeat them, of course, but the AP will mean that they're not completely useless. For Starling, it's going to be certain types of units, like javelins and stuff like the Trollmen and Hashari, which are going to be super useful in this engagement. I'd send forward the Trollmen, honestly. Their presence is going to be necessary if you're going to win a battle like this. Muhad Berserkers fighting hard on the front line. Their AP is all well and good, but they're very close to Pharazim Swordmasters, which is not ideal for them. Meanwhile, let's just see over here, the main body of Inarius' Umbar army, the infantry, is still over here. And he will be meeting a portion of the Dol Amroth infantry. I think some of the Dol Amroth infantry, yeah, has moved up over there. So I think the presence of quite a few militia units. I mean, there's still Haven Guard over here. I think based on numbers, though, I would still say that Inarius should finish off this wing of the Dol Amroth army, to be brutally honest. I mean, it's going to maybe the Haven Knights, because there's not really any cavalry over here anymore. I think the Alcarondas Faithful are moving back over here. So I think it's a race against time, to be honest with you, for Dol Amroth to be able to do something over here. There goes the Numenor general, skewered by some Belagaea footmen. I mean, Athelond Halberdiers will do decently against Alcarondas Legion if they can get their phalanx operational and in full effect. Yeah, those Corsair crossbows, they're going to be peppering up those Haven Knights as they move around wide, so it really is a race against time for Tundra here. I'm a little bit surprised he moved forward, actually, considering the resources at his disposal. Dorwinion swordsman continuing to follow through on the charge. Yeah, and he's actually doubled back with some of his other units to try and come in from the side. But with the Alcarondas Faithful now in the back lines, I'm not sure he's going to get what he wants from this fight. There goes a general, skewered by the Dragon Knights. Let's go over here. Ines Rim charging into the Hashari, who still have that rather interesting glitch with their weaponry, causing their swords to sort of fly around them. That cohort is surrounded, though, by Hashari and Southrons, but you can actually see over here the assault from Starling has not gone all that well. And I do think part of the problem here is that his elites weren't on hand from the start. He sent forward too many of his lower end stuff, with no real elites on the front line to help shore things up. Or at least they took too long to get there. Meanwhile over here, an absolute mess. Dorwinion for the most part have been cleaned up by Eclipse. He will be victorious over here, although to be fair I don't know if he will be fully victorious over here. There's still Numenor units, Royal Legion, nothing to be taken lightly. Even if he is ultimately victorious over here, Eclipse, he's not going to have much of an army left to support the endeavours of his allies as this battle goes on. Finishing off some of the dangerous units that Dorwinion could still have at their disposal. Shadow bows, a few Umbar in and amongst their ranks. But yes, these Dragon Knights have definitely been making a real nuisance of themselves. Demons of the Desert, they're winding up a shot, presumably onto the Dragon Knights. They're right in front of them after all. I think maybe they cancel. Well, there goes the shot. No, they're going after the Pharazim. That wasn't actually Eclipse, apparently. Inarius' general. At least according to the announcer. They're going after the Pharazim Swordmasters, though, which maybe isn't the worst idea, to be honest with you, because they're so difficult to kill off in melee. And actually a big rout coming from Numenor now as well, so how the tables turn. With a lot of FFA Muffins' Harad arriving over here as well. All of a sudden, Sin's frontline buckles, and all of this runic force that was back here effectively doing nothing is now going to have to very quickly shimmy their way over here, because at this point all they really have going on is cavalry, a few pockets of resistance as well, but not enough of it. So, who's winning over here? Well, Dol Amroth have blown through this side, that flanking force actually proving to be a very sound idea indeed. And yeah, actually he's done alright. It may be to do with the fact that Inarius has been using his cavalry on the other side of the battle as well, but Tundra's Fox has done a really good job actually against the Umbar lines here. Over on this flank the Black Swans are struggling a little bit, but elsewhere the Athelond Halberdiers have done the business. The Haven Guard are getting shot up by crossbow Corsairs. Again, whoever wins over here is going to be a highly Pyrrhic victory. In come the Alcarondas Faithful, but that was a very slow charge, and they don't really want to stay in melee around the Mace Men for too long, otherwise that AP damage will start to bite. These pikes on the front line still proving to be a bit of a problem, as perhaps you would expect. Some of the Haven Guard are also caught up on them, which is not great. Civilians are routing. Belfast Marines being engaged in melee by Dunaim Shield Guard. Alcarondas Faithful, like they could be able to stabilise here Umbar using the Alcarondas Faithful, because I can't see the Haven Knights anymore, which is a sign they were probably shot up by crossbows and then engaged by the Faithful themselves. Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan running away, but they're getting shot by the Corsair crossbow, so it's perhaps understandable, but what are they going to do here? They're going to get into the side of the Adunaim Shield Guard. Should hasten their demise. Now then, Rhun arriving. With Dorwinion and Numenor largely defeated at this stage, they're going to have to be the ones to try and turn back the Harad menace. Will they be successful in that? They probably have a very healthy army, to be honest with you. They're the Carmel's Chosen. Probably not the best fight for them, to be honest with you, against Trollmen. More Trollmen rolling in. Trollmen probably have lower stats than the Carmel's Chosen, but they've got more men in the unit even still, and their AP. Perithil Riders really need to avoid this area with Trollmen and Pikemen. There's still fighting going on over here, apparently, and indeed there is. Numenor still alive. Dorwinion technically still alive as well with their general. Eclipse. Inarius' cavalry still doing its thing. Very messy, but you have to say actually that ultimately Eclipse has ended up losing over on this side, I think. I mean, it's cost Sin and Engsford especially very dearly. And the real problem for them now is going to be the Harad forces that are continuing to push, but even so. All to play for still. Dragonwrath Warlords now. Healthier. Still in top condition, really. That wasn't a charge, though. They're just trying to sort of bulldoze their way through, which is really not to be advised, with pikes and trollmen. Javelins coming in from the Balchoth tribesmen into the south on pikes. Easy kills for them. Carmel's Chosen engaging the demons of the desert, but do they really have anything that can stop them from just pursuing the Carmel's Chosen? Haradrim archers firing away in the background, that's something. Something undefined. Trollmen of Harad still in good quantities. But at this point, I mean, Rhun, with how healthy their army still was, could be in a good position here. Eastron Clansmen with the first level of armour upgrade, proving themselves to be far better as militia than Haradrim spearmen. And there they go, they rout two demons of the desert, both of them over here, but they're being hounded here. This is exactly the right thing for the red team to do, because the demons of the desert with one good volley along the runic lines could really turn this battle sour. So they need to make sure they can't use their bullets. And with crossbows and with cavalry still on hand, they should still be able to do that. What are they firing at now? Well, the Carmel's Dragon Knights almost killed almost to a man there. Another shower of bolts. Meanwhile, over here, yeah, I think Dol Amroth, they just didn't have the numbers over here to be able to deal with Umbar, and that ultimately was the problem. If they had more cavalry support, perhaps. There goes Imrahil. See those dancing swords in the background? Yeah, I would suggest that if he had another unit of his cavalry over here, perhaps the Arathirim, if he kept them in reserve, things could have been a little bit different, but as it was, he just didn't have the numbers to deal with Umbar. He did quite well, all things considered, Thunder's Fox, but Umbar are not going to be the sort of faction to buckle in an infantry fight when the going gets tough, and Dol Amroth have definitely learned that the hard way in this fight, as their Belfalas Marines continue to be hounded by Corsair Blackguards. So a victory over here, which means it's all the more important really for the red team that they score a good result here, which they could still do, to be honest, with Rhun performing quite well. The Harad army starting to tire a little bit, I think, and a lot of the Golden Boys still standing. Over here though, the Numenorians. Oh, hello, War Beasts of Harad. That's a rare enough sight. Absolutely flattening those Balchoth tribesmen. Very, very scary unit to see charging towards you. They're trying to rout these units and they're succeeding to a large extent, but the Scion Rim now are going to be able to get into them. And now they're caught between two different types of spears, so the time has come to leave this place. Good damage has already been done, and can continue to be done, by the War Beast, and at this stage it's pretty much Rhun against the world. And for their betrayal, can they be punished? Oof, again, just two units of clansmen with varying levels of armour upgrades. Huge amounts of damage done there, and Rhun can't afford to lose their numbers at this stage. I mean, the War Beasts are really starting to take a real beating, but they've already put a dent in the runic ranks. Another charge coming in. A less devastating one, but more kills nonetheless. Look at those, like, almost like shark jaw type weapons, quite Polynesian. an attribute I never really had down for Harad, but there you go. Bolts being loose, they're still going after those war beasts, I think. There's still champions of Nafrat sort of here and there as well. That's the problem. Like, Rhun are trying to clean up the Haradrim forces as fast as they can, but what remains is the elite units, so not going to be easy. A few Southrons here and there. Dragon's Wrath Warlords heading out over here. They need to be careful though, they're going to get charged by the Alcarondas Faithful. Melee Knights against Lancers, it's not going to go well. They're just going to go right on through them though. A real drive-by killing there. Haradrim Spearmen, yeah, I think Rhun are going to struggle here. They're still just the remnants of the Haradrim making themselves annoying. And as soon as Umbar arrives on the scene, I think that'll be a hammer blow to Rhun's hopes of trying to win this battle. Trying to hold things down. They're actually being pushed in on from the flanks by Harad even now as well with those trollmen. They're trying to hold them at bay with some Gamperim here, but I don't think it's going to go terribly well for them. Still some Numenorians over here as well, I guess. Some Rangers. Haradrim archers making their way across. Not going to last too long in melee against steel bows, but they can at least stop Sin from cycling around. Very temporary basis of that though, with the wavering going on. Another rear charge coming in from the Alcarondas Faithful. Again, how the tables turn. Rhun were the ones doing some good damage with their cavalry earlier, but now they're going to be subject to some rear charges. From melee cavalry, to be fair, so it's not going to be utterly devastating, but it's not really the sort of thing they can stop from happening at this stage, unless they park their own cavalry in front of it. But if Rhun are to win, they need to be getting some good charges with those lancers, and even with that, I think they'll struggle. Like, charging into pikes like that, they can try and break them, but it's such a risky thing to try and do. Alcarondas Faithful over there. There's some trollmen ripe for the taking. Lancers down. Yes, Lancers down. A good charge as the trollmen continue to try and go after the crossbowmen that are firing away. Victory will be ours. I think maybe Rhun should have shifted across their infantry in this battle slightly sooner when they saw what Numenor were doing. Like, Numenor shifted their army fully over, really, to try and help out Dorwinion. I think at that point Rhun should have sent their whole army over here as well, sort of into these trees, to prevent what ultimately ended up happening, which was two Harad armies crushing Sin underfoot. He did pretty well initially, Sin, but as soon as that second Harad army arrived, Numenor started to flee from the field. Which was a shame, because they did get what they wanted ultimately, and they managed to thwart Eclipse, but again, it's all about how you ultimately end up approaching the battle. And Rhun, while they are the last ones standing, I think they were caught a bit flat-footed earlier on, and that has ultimately ended up costing, especially Numenor. I think Dol Amroth tried to do what they could. They tried to be proactive over on the other side, and it didn't really end up working out in the end, but you've got to appreciate the effort at least. And now Inarius moving across with what remains of his army, which is largely going to be what's left, I think, because there really isn't much left of Harad at all. Alcarondas Faithful moving out. They are going to charge into the Corsair Blackguards. A little bit surprised actually that the Hashari backed off there. They could have continued moving, go around, and then sort of hit them in the rear, but throwing daggers coming in, getting a few good kills. Carmel's chosen trying to stop the full advance of the Umbar army, which isn't going to be terribly successful, I don't think. It is close though. There's not that much left of the blue team, if we're being honest, and what's left of the Reds is still going to be able to put up a decent enough fight. Haradrim Spearmen. Still 39 Harbingers left. Those Rangers still trying to do their thing, but at this point they are exposed to the Alcarondas Faithful. And a decent charge. Eastron Crossbowmen routing after the Alcarondas Faithful continued their momentum, and they were getting slaughtered from the front by Alcarondas Legion. Trollman. Yeah, this is it, isn't it? The final stand. Carmel's chosen, I think, a lock morale, so they will fight to the bitter end, but a bitter end it will be at the hands of the Harbingers. What have we over here? Those Royal Legion have been fighting for a long time. They were fighting with Dorwinion over there, over yonder where the rumour-killed corpses are, and they've made their way back over here. A notoriously tough unit to bring down fully, especially considering their extra men in the unit. Still 1,000 frames left, which is kind of confusing, to be honest with you. Players admitting defeat. Royal Legion of Armenelos getting charged. Surely that'll be the end of them. Apparently there's still one left alive. Yep, you're getting back up. What a lad. The gold armour in a sea of grey and burgundy. Surely that's going to be it for him. Yep. He dies. More dancing swords from the Hashari as you zoom out. At least they were there temporarily. What are we doing now? Oh dear, come on Exfits, please. A duel between a Trollman and a Glade Lord. One that neither side really wins. There's one champion of Nafarat moving forwards as well. Surely he's going to charge in. Here we go. Yep. He gets charged. He's going to follow through. He's just going to charge into the middle of them, and there he goes. That was a short and sweet final stand.
Let victory be a salve on our wounds, proudly earned in the name of the Holy Cross.
Interesting battle that, as it normally is in a free-for-all with players such as this. Very dynamic as well. I feel as though obviously things kicked off over here. Eclipse actually made some good progress despite taking some pretty hefty losses on the approach. He did end up ultimately being defeated though, as a result of Numenor's reinforcements coming across. A lot of cavalry, a lot of chaos over there. But in the end, I do think that one of the main contributing factors to that was the fact that Rhun, they had so much of that infantry too far back and away from the action. Like Numenor was starting to really struggle, and even then Rhun didn't commit their units forward quickly enough for my liking. And I think that was what ultimately made the difference. Even though they did put on a good fight at the end, at that point they had already racked up such a deficit that it was always going to be difficult to fight back from that. Tundra's Fox as well. I mean, he tried to make something happen over on the other side of the field, but he just didn't have the resources left to him to really hammer home anything over there, and he ultimately ended up losing to Inarius. But still, well played enough. Let's see what did the damage for both of the Umbar armies. Alcaronda's faithful and Warlords of Umbar doing very well for Inarius. The cavalry was important in this battle, obviously, for both sides. They were interchanging across the positions of the field, supporting one another, which is good. Alcaronda's Legion obviously on the front line doing very, very nicely for themselves. Some of them anyway. Getting shy of 100 kills, one of them. Hadunheim Shield Guard holding the line very nicely against the Dol Amroth Assault from Tundra. And the Corsair Crossbows obviously. Some of those kills were up against stuff like Haven Knights and Black Swan Renegades, so good quality units killed. As for Eclipse, bit of a tougher battle for him, I would say, and that is reflected in his kills actually. Harbingers did well when things got messy. As did the Axe Guard, actually getting over 100 kills. I'd imagine most of that was on basic Alvalin, but still, that's a decent return. Nara and Iru Sentinels also doing quite well. Belagai Footman with 128, which is not bad for basic spears at all. And the Corsair Infantry doing okay for themselves as well. So actually, it was more the rank and file units for Eclipse that ended up doing okay for him, which is quite interesting, considering the kind of battle that he had. But yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending this battle to me. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of it. Obviously this one, in terms of the quality of the battle itself, was a significant improvement on the ones that have been the ones that have filtered through recently. But even so, what I said at the end of the last video still applies effectively. It's something that I need to have a bit of a think about, I think, because ultimately it's kind of being taken out of my hands a little bit as well with regards to the replays that I'm actually being given at this stage. Something has to give. I have an idea of what I can do relatively soon, depending upon what happens in the next week or so. I will be able to pivot a little bit. It's not anything too drastic or too different, but it will at least allow me to maybe freshen things up whilst keeping things similar enough that people won't leave the channel en masse. Suffice it to say that it's still obviously Third Age related stuff, but we'll have to wait and see. It does sort of depend upon what happens in the next week or so. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.